Hello and welcome to System.debug level 65 lightning testing. You have Adam, Nate, and Megan here, and we are super excited on this, the lovely 27th of January, 2020. Oh, so exciting.
You're the rat, baby.
Woo! I actually saw that at the bank the other day when I went to the ATM. It told me it was You're the Rat, and I was like, well, okay.
Apparently, Salesforce Tower had like a big rat symbol on it.
Really?
Yeah. Shauna messaged that on Twitter, and I was like, yeah, that's cool. I didn't know they were going to do that, but that's cool.
Well, nice. Here I am thinking I'm learning because of the ATM, and I could have learned on the Twitters.
What can't you learn on Twitter? Well, probably the stuff we're talking about today. Well, maybe you can learn this on Twitter. I don't know.
I don't know if we'd have enough characters. Like, I think we'd hit some limits.
This is definitely not a mobile-friendly module in Trailhead. It's still hands-on.
Not
this
yet.
Is not a Trailhead Go.
Yeah, exactly.
Someday maybe.
Before we dive into all the excitement about testing, there is some cool stuff going on locally. Let's not forget the local stuff. It is global gathering time. I don't know if you guys have gone to your local global gathering. I know there's still some out there available.
I know there was in New York recently. I think there's one in Toronto, but I don't currently have plans to get there. But I'm working on it.
Nice. Did you go to one yet, Nate?
Not yet. Let's see. Where LA is having a developer group meeting on February 11th.
Okay.
So that's a deep dive into Salesforce DX. But I'm checking. The admin group does have something on that same day. Peter Coffey doing his amazing thing.
He is so amazing.
Yeah, I think our LA's global gathering that the admin group ran has passed. But yeah, there's January 14th was ours.
There were a bunch of them that have happened. There's still some out there that I think they're going through February. Was the option the user group leaders had. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure we had through February to do them, or until February, one of the two. But jumping back to Peter Coffey, I saw him like IRL for the first time at Snowforce a few years ago, and watching him speak in person just blew me away.
Peter
blew
Coffey?
me away. Yeah.
He's going to be keynoting at True North Dreaming in April. He did our 2019, and he's coming back for 2020. I'm pretty sure that's public.
Wow. That is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm hoping to make it to True North. It's on my maybe list. We'll see how it goes.
You probably should.
Well, it all depends on how things work out. But there's some other really cool events going on too. True North is on my list. There are 2 events in Canada this year that are on my list. But speaking of closer events, so there's Snowforce. That one is coming up, and that one is on the 26th to 28th of February.
All right.
Because there's a day that you're gonna go out and hang out on the mountain and have a lot of fun.
Nice.
People go snowboarding and skiing, or if you got an A+ in lodge sitting, you can come and do what I do when everybody else goes skiing.
The old après ski.
Yeah. There's also Ski Force 313.
Speaking of
there
skiing.
is right. There's London's Calling. I do love those international ones. I try to hit a couple of those a year, at least one.
It's definitely on my list, especially this year, because it's right around the Pluralsight author meetup in London, or they have a conference. So I've been trying to see if maybe I can hit both, but nothing yet. We'll see.
So for me, I just love the name of that event. That just makes me want to go every single time.
London Calling.
Right?
French touch streaming.
It's just so perfect. And then of course, True North, which Adam, thank you for the stickers. from True North at Dreamforce.
You bet.
Still have them.
We try to stay up on our sticker game. We got some cool stuff. It's in Vancouver this year, so we're trying to get some Vancouver specific content. We're working on it.
Ooh. Yeah, and Vancouver is just a hop, skip, and a jump away from there.
You really have no excuse.
That's like a half an hour drive. No traffic.
That would be like, it's just like getting out of Seattle. Dude.
Pointless to say, yeah. It's like, oh, with no traffic, because that'll happen. Awesome.
Yeah, the day we don't have traffic in Seattle, like for some reason, rush hour seems to start at like noon on the 405. I don't get why.
It's because it's called 405. That's a curse number.
I think it's because it's the 405.
Yeah. That'd do
it. But yeah. And then there's also same time as True North is LA Dream In, Dream LA.
Dream LA, yeah.
Dream LA over in Barcelona. That sounds gorgeous.
It does. It does. A little far for some of us, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Might be closer to get to True North.
To Vancouver. Yeah.
we're hoping we're not gonna like split. People are like, oh, I could have gone to this one, or I was planning on going to this one. Like, hopefully that's not the case, because they're so far away.
And British Columbia is just gorgeous.
It's true. It's Canada, right? So what's not to love?
The 49 states that I have road trip to, the most fun trip I ever went on was the trip that I tried to go to to get out of the US for the 4th of July to find a campsite. And I was like, I'm just gonna go to Canada. So, but it's Canada Day weekend that weekend. And so we ended up driving all the way to Alaska of the BC coast. It was so pretty.
That sounds amazing.
And just went on a really fun road trip.
There's actually there's a comedy troupe based out of BC they're streamers and stuff as well, but they did a show called Road Quest where they drove 3 vehicles all the way from Victoria, BC up to the Yukon. It was awesome. Like, you got to see them drive through all of BC, and there was some really pretty stuff. It's a nice drive.
Nice. Very cool.
I remember the one time I was ever in Vancouver, I just drove up one weekend in college. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to Vancouver. And
there you go.
I mean, as soon as you get, like, coming from LA, when you get to like Mount Shasta, Oregon, it's like, okay, there's some nature. But I just remember the bay. It was May, probably at sunset. And it was just like, wow, the sky, just everything. Huge difference.
The last time I was in Vancouver, actually I've been to Vancouver a few times, but the most memorable time, I guess, is the group I was working for at the time had a big conference going on at the Vancouver Conference Center, which is right by the water, and it was just beautiful.
Nice.
Yeah.
So the next trip that I get to go on is actually for Salesforce, but instead of going north, I'm going towards you, Nate. I am actually heading down towards California, Southern California. I'm going to take the 601 Certified Technical Architect prep class to get ready for my panel this year.
It's in the 70s. Come on down. I'd say there's plenty of room, but there's really not. But we can squeeze you in.
It was in the upper 50s today here, so I'm not going to complain, man.
Okay.
I do live in Seattle. It's not like I did go to Detroit this week though, last week, and I went to my company meeting. Beautiful water bottles, nice. and mugs. But that was cold. It was so cold. There was ice and snow on the ground. Yeah. I don't have clothes for that type of weather. Like hoodies and Vans do not keep you warm in like 20-degree weather.
All of them.
Yeah, but that's my excitement is Salesforce training, dreaming events, and hanging out with my team, and now hearing about lightning testing. And I'm actually excited. I don't know. I've taken a few of those Salesforce classes, and I really like them. I don't know if all of you have had the opportunity to take any of them, but they're a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend checking them out if you haven't yet.
Okay. All right. Well,
But
maybe we should talk a little bit about testing and stuff like that.
Well, let's talk a bit about this lightning testing.
Okay,
Speaking of learning,
I think, I mean, before we get started, maybe we should kind of break down what kind of, like, because lightning testing is a little bit vague, right? So maybe we should talk about the different types that we're going to be talking about.
Does that have anything to do with Lightning Connect?
No. Because lightning means a lot of things, right? But I think the idea here is like, or at least when we were talking about this, the idea was that we could talk about the different ways that you need to test when you're building lightning applications, right? And obviously the way that you build lightning applications is also changing quite a bit as time goes by. But there's some things that stay the same. Like you want to follow like similar patterns and stuff like that.
Question quick. When you say lightning, are you talking about Aura or LWC?
Well, see, that's what I'm talking about. Is that you know, when we say lightning, it's very ambiguous. So there are some things that we can do to test Lightning Web Components. There's some things we can do to test Aura. And there's some things that you want to do regardless. In fact, there's several things that we kind of want to do regardless of what we're dealing with. Right? Because like if you've been working in the Salesforce space for a while, you've always been doing unit testing on your Apex code, right? You literally can't get your Apex code into production unless you've got testing around it. We're not going to talk about testing horror stories. I feel like we could go on forever about that. But like just because you're building stuff in Aura or in LWC, like in a lot of cases, you're still going to have Apex controllers, right? So your unit testing for your Apex is not going to go away. You just need to do other stuff as well. Because now you got more stuff going on the server side. And that means that sometimes we can't really do unit testing. There is Lightning unit testing, and Salesforce is kind of like building up to it. And actually, Mark asked a good question in the chat. Hey, Mark. I guess we mentioned that people should totally ask questions in the chat?
Yes, please make your comments in the chat.
Yes.
Don't forget to click subscribe.
Yeah.
Links in the description later.
But anyway, because like there is a whole thing that you can do with unit testing inside Lightning. And I believe, if I'm not crazy, there is like already documentation and stuff like that around writing jest tests and such for your Lightning Web Components. So even if you just look in the developer guide, there's a whole section on test Lightning Web Components, and Salesforce has kind of picked jests to be the selection to do this. There's been within like the JavaScript development space for a while, there's been a couple of different ways to do this kind of even just pure unit testing. But a lot of them are, and in fact, even in like default JavaScript, you have assertions and that kind of stuff that you can use. So there's a number of options, and Salesforce has kind of settled on Jest as the primary kind of testing framework for testing your LWC unit tests. So if you haven't looked into that, I strongly recommend that you do. You can just go into the Lightning Web Components developer guide, and under the test Lightning Web Components, it talks about how to like install and run and write Jest tests. Once you do that, there's some great examples out there, some documentation around writing unit tests in JavaScript. And that's more generic, but it's going to help you a lot. Now,
so quick question. So how does that apply compared to the tests that you're already writing in Apex?
So Apex unit testing is similar, right? The concept, like, there's a few different types of testing out there. There's like integration testing. There's unit testing, which is one that we're more familiar with, and most
sanity
of the time,
testing.
Well, sanity testing is more of like a more of a qualifier than anything, right? Like, does my application stand up, or does it immediately fall over and catch fire? But for most of us, when we think of testing, especially when we think of testing code, we're thinking of unit testing. That isn't always true, especially if you're kind of like testing front end, where you might be doing kind of like more integration testing, or more kind of like front end testing, where you're actually making sure that the components on the page do what they're supposed to do. And sometimes you can't just do that through poking things in code. So
really quick, so where
yeah.
where does that type of testing fall in comparison to things such as apps like Provar?
So I haven't worked with Provar directly. So if you want to kind of like describe,
or like Selenium.
Yeah. So okay. So Selenium is actually something I want to talk about today, right?
Okay.
So Selenium is a different type of testing. Selenium is like automated testing suites and like defining automated testing suites, but it's more about testing your user interface. It allows you to kind of like set up like playback for different kind of different test suites. But initially, it was something that was more used for this type of integration testing. That's useful, and especially when you're working in something like Aura, there were fewer options available to us because Aura was kind of like this like hybrid of like components, but they weren't pure JavaScript components. You had a lot of like Aura specific work to do. It was a little bit tougher to actually get the things that you wanted tested. Salesforce came out with something called the Lightning Testing Service, LTS for short. And you can see that it's available on the force.com GitHub account. So you can go check out that repo. And they've got some good good instructions on how to use that. But it essentially allows you to do the same kind of thing. What it is, ultimately, is kind of like a wrapper around very popular JavaScript testing frameworks, like common JavaScript testing frameworks, specifically Jasmine and Mocha out of the box. And those are very like standard. Prior to something like Jest, they were very, very popular for building either unit testing or kind of like behavior testing, or well, really those two. So you can wrap your tests for your unit tests in the LTS in order to still do unit testing on something like Aura. There's also Selenium. And so you can essentially have like your Selenium tests that are testing your front end, your Jasmine or Mocha wrapped around LTS that is going to test your as much as possible. And then your what was I going to say? And then you can still do your standard unit tests in Apex. Oh, we got a couple more items here. Hey, Ryan, and hey, Mike.
Hey, guys. Ryan, hey.
Hey.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah, so Mike, really quick, I mean, personally, when it comes to Selenium or Cucumber, I've looked at both of those. And honestly, the amount of time that it takes to configure and set up, you can look at something that is already a package and work with a partner that 100% supports Salesforce versus using something that's not made for Salesforce. Yeah, when looking at something versus free versus looking at something paid, you get what you pay for versus looking at, having to set it up and configure it, especially because you end up having to redo it for every customer because no org is ever the same.
Right.
If you're in consulting, it becomes a lot more of a lift to use things like that. In the initial setup, especially due to the fact that it's very hard and cumbersome for people like admins and consultants to use, it's very, very difficult.
Yeah,
Like my experience.
As solution designers, right, we're always kind of trying to balance buy versus build. And it's especially if you've got the budget for it, something like Provar that's doing all the kind of heavy lifting around configuring Selenium or something like that, especially declaratively, it makes it a lot easier. The downside for any of this kind of like declarative configuration is that, of course, if you make any changes in the UI, stuff that doesn't have to go through code, especially if you've got like admins who are like running in your system and doing stuff that they're not necessarily testing in the same process as all of your code testing, your test suites for front-end testing can break pretty quickly. On the other hand, if you've got like a lot more developer time and maybe not as much budget or like external budget, you can set up your own Selenium or what have you. To be fair, even if you're building unit tests, if somebody goes and changes that code, obviously those tests are going to fail. But there's less of a disconnect there because it's part of the overall development process. Does that make sense? I think that answers the questions that were in there.
Yeah. So let's see, looking at the questions. So here's a question. We know that this is like this sort of testing doesn't need to be involved with continuous integration or continuous development. But where, like, really to, for like a release manager or team lead or the architect to do this manually, right, after UAT is signed off and before we deploy to prod, doesn't seem to make sense, right? What's the goal?
Absolutely.
And like, where does LTS fit in with, Apex unit tests happen on the org, and those are kicked off. You could do like run local tests or run specified. How does that fit in with kind of a ideal?
So you can execute LTS through SFDX commands. So as part of your normal CI/CD process, you can absolutely include in your build script LTS testing, just like you can in your npm scripts run your unit tests if you're using something like Jasmine, Mocha, or Jest. Normally, you can just run it as an SFDX command as opposed to an npm command.
Got it. And so you'll obviously need files in your repo that kick off these tests. But do you need something installed in the org? Like I remember there was some sort of managed or unmanaged package that...
For LTS, yes, you do. For if you're using Jest to test your LWC, then no, you don't need anything special built special for that installed in your org. There's like package stuff that you're going to want to do as part of your package.json in your project, but that's part and parcel of kind of like living in a node world, which we are.
Got it. So you'll want like a like Docker image or some sort of setup.
We don't need to go that far. Your CI/CD will normally be running on some kind of, even if you're using something like Travis or Circle or whatever, it's already living on a computer. So you can just configure your script that way and it'll run as part of it. You don't need to set up a completely separate like Docker image for running this stuff, not unless you're trying to build your own CI/CD service. Obviously, some groups have that. That's great, but it's certainly not required.
Okay, cool. And then what are some of the things that you would want to be in the of testing? For instance, not query the database and get X records back, right?
Mm-hmm.
But perhaps like click this button and spinner should be there, right? Like what are some examples of kind of the scope of what we would want to check?
Well, I mean, so if you look at that point, what you're doing is you're like checking for like element interaction, which is more front end testing. So that's outside the unit testing side of things, but it's certainly something that you can do with LTS.
Mm-hmm.
You can also do it with like straight Selenium. So I maybe Megan, you can speak to Provar and how they work with that kind of stuff, but I can't speak to that.
Sorry, I was answering questions in the chat about Selenium or Provar. Which one? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I was asking you kind of a similar question. Like what Nate was asking was like how the process works for kind of designing or defining these tests in something like Provar.
Yeah. So for Provar, it's different than Selenium. You install a package and then you can actually sit there. The great thing about it is instead of having to have your dev and architect team do the configuration, is you can pass it off to QA or VA. And you can literally have them run through and point and click their way through. On the side, you kind of get like a little sidebar and it writes the script to the side as they're going through. If something isn't immediately configurable, you can have them either type it in, or you can go in and you can actually go in and you could configure it on the back end if you wanted to within that panel. You can even go in and get to the level of typing in what event should be doing while they're doing stuff or not doing.
Okay, so
but it's literally just point click.
So they're essentially kind of like just recording the screen actions into like plain English and then executing that script.
Correct. And then you can run it through, you can upload it into the next org, run it through, throw it in your source control, have it go through with your deployments while you do it. Super handy.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's the fact that it's that handoff so that it's less hours and it's different billable hours for who's doing it.
I mean, as somebody who likes to kind of like sit and code, even if I like agree that having somebody else be able to kind of like define the test is certainly helpful.
Mhm.
I think that it does. One of the things I want to kind of like highlight is that does not take responsibility for making sure that your code executes and tests well away from the engineer. We still have to write.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely not. That is still the responsibility of the developer. But it does help when you are, that dev or that architect on the project and you've got all of this, helps lift that QA load off of you and that testing load, which helps you focus on some of the actual bugs instead of some of that front end work that could be passed off.
Totally. And I guess like one of the things that you definitely want to do, like you don't want to just have this kind of testing in your sandbox. When there's new releases coming out, you want to be setting
regression testing.
Well, yeah, you want to be not only regression testing for your own code, but regression testing for everything that Salesforce is releasing. So making sure that you get your pre-release org, that you get your test suites running against that pre-release org, so you can head off some of these problems at the pass. Just reading through the release, documentation to see what's coming, isn't really going to keep you safe.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's one of those other things where when you're looking at something that is declarative versus code for configuration, one of the big things, it's not so much about whether it's declarative or code, it's how much time does it take to configure as a whole. Because if somebody has to be spending the time doing it, how many times do you have to be rebuilding from scratch, and how much of a lift is it over and over that needs to be considered as well?
Yeah, absolutely. But anywhere that we can kind of like use existing either code or configuration or whatever, and make modifications to it as opposed to having to design it out of whole cloth, that's better, right?
Absolutely.
So I got a question. I guess two separate things. One would be, is LTS something that you would be able to use to assert that like a component's picking up an application event or a component event?
I mean, you can, right? You can also kind of, so you absolutely can, right? Especially if you're dealing with Aura, which it sounds like you are because you're talking about application events. That is the kind of thing that you can test. So if you look at the process, essentially what you'll do is like you'll fire one of those events and then you'll listen, and they might have you like kind of like pass a piece of message, or at least some like flip some kind of switch so that you can make sure that you know when it's actually received that application event. And that way you can make sure that your test passes.
Got it.
Shameless plug, I did create a play-by-play on Pluralsight that goes into this. So if you have a Pluralsight account, you can check that out. If not, you can totally get a free trial and check it out.
Look for the link below in the description.
I think you've actually looked at that a bit, haven't you, Nate?
I have. It's if you're not a member already, you can definitely sign up for a free trial and I got through the play-by-play in my 7 days. So it was definitely worth it. Definitely
I'm glad to hear that.
Oh, and then one more. Since it's front-end testing, it doesn't sound like permissions, like running as a separate user, comes into play at all. Is that true? Like,
wait, sorry, run that question by me again.
Like, so when we're doing Apex unit testing, it's best practice to run as not system admin, right? Like to run as a different
yeah,
user.
of course. You want to act as the user that you're testing for, right? And you hypothetically want to be testing for different behavior for different user types. You can do the same thing for LTS.
Nice.
Yep. Cool. Well, it's 8 o'clock.
It is indeed, and we have gotten a lot of stuff done, and we have talked to a lot of people. We had a super active chat today.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, Mark, and Ryan specifically for all the questions.
Absolutely, yeah. Really good topic, really good feedback. This was fantastic. Thank you so much, Ada, for sharing all your knowledge from your Pluralsight class. That's fantastic. And a real life expert here talking about the subject.
I don't know, not an expert. Just somebody who won't shut up.
We're not worthy.
As if.
But no, this was great. And so For those of you that are not yet following us, please make sure to check us out on the Twitters, Megan SF, and for me, and then we have Nate.
S Force be with you.
And Adam.
At Adam Daw.
And please don't forget to like and subscribe to the show. And then subscribe. Sorry.
There we go.
I know my rights and lefts. One of these is an L. And then other than that, we will be back in 2 weeks. And don't forget, check out your local user groups. Make sure you check out what your local dreaming events are. We got True North coming up. See if we can all go hang out, listen to some Clash of London while we're at it, and have a good time. And then other than that, peace out and see you in 2 weeks.
Sounds great. Have a good one, everyone.
Keep debugging, y'all. Bye.
Bye-bye.